I really forgot to record an intro, so welcome to The Pit. I actually get to use my full-time career when discussing TL this week. So for those that didn't see, they beat Cloud9, which is a massive achievement, but then they lost their other games, and it's just like, if you're TL, how do you project this team? What does it look like going forward? And I think here's an important thing that you need to do, and that is remove the outliers from the overall picture. In other words, if it's not an apples to apples comparison, it's not fair. In the financial world, when we are forecasting information into the future, what you need to do is you need to take a look at your current data set that you have and validate it. Make sure, do all of these numbers, is everything that makes up this line item on a profit and loss statement or balance sheet, does it make sense? Are there any anomalies here that you can remove that will make your forecast more accurate? Because our job as financial analysts is to try and be as accurate as possible when predicting the future. So for the sake of Team Liquid here, is their win versus Cloud9 an outlier when you look at the rest of the data that is available, that is their recent results? And the answer is yes, it is. So I'm going to exclude it when looking at TL, who overall has honestly not looked that impressive since their week 1 3-0. It's the same problems that they've had all split in spring and are clearly having in summer as well, barring that first week. But I will say the bright spot for this team is that Yeon and Core JJ, quite frankly, look incredible. Yeon, in his first split in the LCS, is already proving himself. And quite frankly, I think it's just going to be a guy that you need to keep an eye on because he can develop into something incredible. His laning is really, really damn good. So now it's just a matter of the rest of the team coming together. And again, it's always been their communication and synergy with each other, making the right decisions to go in at the right times together. That has always been a problem. Or their mid-game macro, where it's like, oh, why are you making some of these plays, TL? You could be so good, but you're just, But yeah, I'm mid on them. Maybe they'll prove me wrong. They have the potential to, but I'm not with that. Cloud9 are annoying, man, I swear. Like, they're still clearly like the best team in the league despite being tied with Evil Geniuses, and their week this week showed exactly why. It's like they have these games where they just flat out in, and it can be experimental, and I get that. By all means, picking Zeri mid was a choice, and ultimately it didn't matter because their bot lane inted early on, but like because they're just the better team, and quite frankly the best team in the league, they then face up against Evil Geniuses in what is supposed to be one of the most hyped matchups of the split, having top team versus top team, and they just stomp them. Like, it's not even close. It's not, honestly, not all that entertaining as well. It's like, oh man, it really does feel like we're back in like the TL double lift era of just like having Cloud9 at the top of the standings and just knowing that they're gonna win the split kind of sucks. And by all means, it's on everybody else to step up and try and beat them. That's not a knock on Cloud9. It's just from an entertainment point of view, it's like, we really can't have like anything else? Come on. I had an interview with Berserker this week, and this was right after the really tough loss before they rebounded and beat EG. So I didn't talk much about the game of Berserker, but I did talk about food, and his food opinions were shocking.
I'm gamer, right? So I'm not to like go outside, you know. So to be honest, like Korea is better personally because like Korea have like a lot of delivery food, you know.
You know, Los Angeles is like one of the hubs of delivery food in the United States, right?
But like for my like town, Korean food is better. Just that sure. But I like LA.
So what's the best restaurant you've been to in LA?
Korea BBQ in K-Town.
I'm assuming we're not all surprised that Dignitas is like in the middle of the pack right now, actually contending to be a semi-decent team, right? Like, they have Santorin, they have Jensen, Rich has been playing pretty good counter picks, similar to what Golden Guardians is doing with Licorice. Like, overall, this team actually has some players that have potential. Also, don't forget, Jensen is literally the defending Summer Split mid lane champion. So the fact that they are middle of the pack playing the way that they are right now is good. The question becomes for Dignitas, what's your ceiling? What are you reaching for here? Like, are you happy if you're a Dig fan and they finish middle of the pack like this, like 5th, 6th, just barely miss out on Worlds because that's currently the slate that they're going on. If you're a Dig fan and that makes you happy, then great, sure. But like, I feel like for most fans, the goal is ultimately to like win a title. And the question is the ceiling there for this roster? Like, is this one of those rosters where the floor is really high, but the ceiling is also capped? Or is there like this extreme? Because last split, they obviously didn't look good, but they made some changes and are now looking better. Tomio's continuing to develop. Some people are iffy on Diamond, but personally, I thought he's looked pretty decent overall, and Rich has been, honestly, a pretty significant upgrade, all things considered. I don't think their ceiling's that high, personally. I would say this is about as good as this roster is going to get, all things considered, and if they can maintain this pace at the end of the year, then great. Like, they're on a good path. But there's also a world in the second round robin where 100 Thieves steps up, FlyQuest continues to ramp up, and Dignitas just starts dropping down the standings again. So, anything could happen here. Will it? I don't know. We'll see. Those of you that were on the FlyQuest panic train, congratulations. You've officially offloaded. You've gotten off. You're chilling. You're good. Granted, it was an easy week for FlyQuest in terms of like relative schedule strength, but a 3-0 is a 3-0. And they looked really good doing it. Now, for those that are aware, yes, I'm wearing a FlyQuest shirt. No, I'm not a FlyQuest fan. I just have a bunch of LCS jerseys because I like to support the ecosystem and the teams. Look, we all should want FlyQuest to do well. They're one of the higher paying rosters in the league. You don't want to see teams that invest money into their roster ultimately falter. Sure, it can be funny for an entertainment value sake, but like, you do want there to be clear hierarchy in the league. And I do think that FlyQuest's second half of the split is going to rebound heavily from this 3-6 start. I do not think this is where they're gonna end up at the end of the split. I mean, next week alone, they play 100 Thieves, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm terrified. If FlyQuest gets hot, like we've heard in scrims, they can potentially be the best team in the league, and this would be like an all-time legendary run if FlyQuest goes on to win the split after starting 06 and just having every bit of memes against them. People saying, should Winsome come in? Should all these random things happen because this roster is just falling apart? And if they're able to turn it around, they stuck through the adversity and then were able to come back and win it all. I know I'm reaching towards the end a little bit here. I get it. But man, would that be one hell of a story. Vikla is clearly like still an issue for this roster for the most part. They definitely need to step up him specifically if they want to start contending against top teams. But they took care of the teams below, well, the teams that were at their level, which is the important part. Prince is back on his fuck shit, which is good. I like that. Prince is back on his grind, which is good. You want Prince to be a top 80 carry in this league. You don't want him to just fall off into oblivion. And now it turns this whole second half of the split and the entire standings as we knew them right now on their head. If FlyQuest is shooting up the roster or the standings, nobody's safe. Golden Guardians are interesting. I mean, they're still maintaining their form from spring mostly, but it's definitely shaky around the edges, that's for certain. Their wins are not all that clean for the most part, barring the win versus Team Liquid, which was a pretty solid way to end your final round robin. So overall, Golden Guardians comfortably sits as like the third best team in the LCS right now, right about where people expected them to be, not myself, coming into the split. But it definitely feels like there's that potential to drop. And maybe you want to call me a Golden Guardians hater because I am to a certain extent, but at the same time, it's probably a good thing because Jat flipped and became a Golden Guardians supporter or fan, and it ended up causing them to lose to NRG. So, for Inaro's sake and for everybody at Golden Guardians' sake, you're welcome for me being a hater. I will continue to do so. Maybe that's part of me being salty that they beat 100 Thieves because we gave Licorice counterpick and gave him Rumble and then couldn't figure out how to handle ourselves against it. But I did have an interview with Gory this week and got to talk to him about a bunch of things outside of just the game itself. And honestly, he's quickly becoming like one of my favorite mid laners in the LCS. Like, he's solid. He's not like top tier to the point where I would consider him like a potential superstar in the league just yet. He hasn't shown that, but in terms of his personality, how easy he is to get along to, and then obviously him playing pretty solid on the Rift, I like it. It's fun to see. What's the best animation out there right now?
Animation? It's Japan's Demon Slayer. You know? Demon Slayer and Attack on Titan. Yeah, both.
What is the worst possible thing that could have happened for TSM this week? Ruby comes in, this mid laner that, quite frankly, people wanted Insanity to start, people weren't so high on him, and you're just hoping, maybe he puts up a good showing, because it's on TSM management for subbing him in, that's not on the player whatsoever. It's a crappy situation for Ruby, crappy situation for Insanity, and TSM is the ones making it. You wouldn't want to go 0-3, but they did. I mean, luckily when I talk to Ruby, he's taking this with stride and he's used to the competition.
I started pro player since I was 18, and right now I'm 24, like 6 years. Especially in Korea, my life was just competitive. I have always have, if I am main player, I always have sub player. If I'm sub player, always have to like beat my main player. So like, it's not pressure at all. Like it was my life, like how the way I through the pro player.
So assuming that he's used to this competition, I feel confident and comfortable saying this then. He shouldn't be starting right now, Insanity should.
It may be 3 o'clock in the morning in New York City on a Saturday night, but by the time you see this, news came out that Insanity is now starting again for TSM, which I am very happy about, but I'm also tipsy, so back to sober me.
But the problem is now you've disrupted the chemistry of TSM to the point where even putting Insanity back in is not necessarily going to make the biggest difference in the world, because honestly, you don't mess with momentum. When you have momentum, you let it ride. And Insanity was playing insanely well and honestly deserves a starting spot in the LCS. Not for TSM because they're not going to be in the split next year, and I'm not going to hold back my feelings on that. But like, this whole situation is the epitome of what's wrong with the LCS. "400 Thieves." Yeah, I've still got TFC, 15-minute long review of everything that happened this weekend, but I do want to highlight my Busio interview here because he talked about the loss that they had against Golden Guardians, which I think is important to note, and then just also about the team in general, this split, because for those that don't know, this was Kane's first week here, Quid's second week, and Quid is continuing to look a little bit better and better. So based on what Busio says, I'm feeling pretty good about this team. But
that one should have been a win, but it's okay. Like, close game. Obviously, like, it shows we have the skills to win against a team that's good. So yeah. Well, it's really nice. Quid's getting way more comfortable, which I love to see. Kane being in person is great. We don't need a review on Discord anymore when it's 4 a.m. for him. So that's wonderful, and just having all the boys in person is just a huge upgrade, yeah.
eating a lot of Subway.
A lot of Subway.
Who would have guessed that only changing your bot lane would not ultimately change your style as a team? For NRG, it's still Dokla, it's still Palafox, it's still Contracts. And shocker, this team is still as streaky as ever, and still will chuck any sort of lead that they have and make any game close when it really shouldn't be. Like, every game it seems like they have a chance to win, and then they just don't. But it's the same issues for the same team for over a year now, or what, a year and a half, 2 years now? Oh my god. It's got to be aggravating, and I know NRG is not going to sit there and take this lightly. Like, obviously they are going to make changes and figure out what's going on in the offseason, but for now, like, let's just enjoy the final ride of this roster, likely, because it's got to be maddening if you're a fan of these players and of this team to just constantly have these same highs and lows and feel like it never gets fixed. It's like, there's a rule in business that I personally have for myself, my job, and I hope others would have as well. It's like, you make a mistake once, fine, like, good, make mistakes and mess up. Second time, sure, but you hopefully made some progress on it. If you make that same mistake a third time, then that's a problem. You're not learning, you're not progressing, you're not moving forward, and it feels like that's where the squad is at. It's like, they're now making similar mistakes throughout the entirety of their roster, and it's not changing, nothing's working. So I don't know where you go. Like, they play teams close, they cause major upsets all the time, and then you feel like they can get a playoff run, and then it doesn't happen. You can't keep making the same mistakes. You really can't. As a fan, like, that's how you get people to tune out, if there's not change consistently. And that's not saying change with the roster, but at least like changes in how you win or lose. If you're losing the same way every time, it's like, bro, come on. There's a story that I like to use from Optic Gaming's history in Halo that perfectly describes Evil Geniuses this week. Optic Maniac, who was a big personality within Optic for years, came back to the Halo team, and we just had this kind of ragtag group of guys that, quite frankly, nobody really thought that like they were going to be as good as they were. But the one nice thing about Halo is that you scrim on stream in front of everybody. It's one of the ways that makes Halo and Call of Duty, well, used to make Call of Duty, very entertaining. So when this squad came together and started progressively getting better quickly in these public scrims, people started getting a little bit hyped. Now, there was always this roster, and I think it was Luminosity at the time, or I don't even know who they were under at that moment. But like they were the clear like God squad, like top of Halo, best in the world, like. So you had Optic building and building and building to the point where it actually felt like Optic Halo could contend with this squad that was clearly the best in the league by a wide margin. So it just became this big, hyped up event. The stream practice was set. Everybody knew it was coming. It was going to be like a best of 9 or whatever it was. And everybody tuned in. I'm not like the entire green wall showed up for that match. And Optic got crushed. Like horribly crushed, and then they just collapsed from there. Like they were climbing, hit second, like lost to them, and then just plummeted off the face of the earth. Am I saying that EG is going to collapse and go down to the bottom of the standings? No, absolutely not. But that's exactly what the storyline felt like for EG, that we were building up and building up towards this moment where EG could possibly overtake them. We finally have this team that can contend with Cloud9, and then they just get absolutely slaughtered. It wasn't even close. It was like C9 had a point to freaking prove, and it was like, oh, this sucks. You spend all this time hyping up this roster, they're building and building, and then it's just like clear that like Cloud9 is the best team, and nobody's close to being on their level. Even if they throw one game in the regular season or 2 games in the regular season, like it doesn't make a difference. They're still just there. So for EG, cool that they're second. I hope they maintain this. I hope this loss versus Cloud9 does not ultimately cause them to tumble back down the standings. Very long way to go if they want to contend for first, which quite frankly, given the first half of the split, is now the expectation for this roster. Look, it's not surprising that Immortals went 0-3. Almost everybody had them power ranked last. The fact that they came out and started off hot with a 2-1 first week is great, but the fact that they're now on a 7-game loss streak sucks. And honestly, it's just quite frankly emblematic of where the org is at right now. I don't doubt that some of these players could go on to play better elsewhere, but at least on this roster, it's just not going to happen. There was actually a moment in the voice comps that they released for Immortals' insane win over NRG that made me realize that this is probably Kenby's last split. Simple stuff like calling out your smite not being able to be done shows just communication issues, stage fright, everything else. And it's like, you can't, I hope he goes down to Academy, can work on it, and then eventually maybe work his way back up. But like, I don't want to spend too much time on Immortals because it feels like you're beating a dead horse.
So I am confusion.
I'm confused on what happened to documentary series in League of Legends and esports in general. Viewership just seems like it's hitting an all-time low for some of these series, including on Cloud9, including Squad for Team Liquid. But then you look at Optic and The Process, a video that's released once a month, 24 plus minutes, and these hit 6-figure views every single time. Why? Because the green wall's invested in this org. It shows all the different parts. Now, yes, the majority of people might be there for Call of Duty, but still, it's just clear buy-in and dedication to the team from the fans that does not exist with any other org. Literally nobody else is having this kind of viewership on documentary series anymore on YouTube. Just Optic. So that brings the question, and why I'm confused of like, what can be done here for teams to finally buy some fan loyalty, or like what can they do differently that would make people actually invest and care?
You know what really grinds my gears?
This is what it currently looks like in terms of the open seats remaining for LCS finals in New Jersey at the Prudential Center this year. New Jersey being very close to New York City, so it's a big market. You would assume there's going to be a lot of attention, and it likely should sell out, assuming they're doing that big circle setup that they've been doing now for 3 splits in a row. But when you don't fill the seats, it doesn't look good. That was very apparent in spring of this year. So my question is, if you know that demand is not where it once was for the LCS, if you know that it is smaller than it used to be, why would you not change the setup? For example, in spring 2022, this was what we had. We had more of a theater style setup that basically had everything funneled down to a single point.